Yeah, so we are now joined on Rational Radio by Chester County District Attorney Tom Hogan. Mr. Hogan, thank you for joining us here on Rational Radio.
Absolutely, Ryan. Good to be here.
So just to start out, I want to, from a prosecutor's standpoint, I just talk a little bit about the death penalty and maybe if you can see where Justice Scalia is kind of coming from, where he thinks maybe opinions are changing.
Sure. First of all, let me say it's not irrational to be against the death penalty, and it's not irrational to be for the death penalty. There are good arguments on both sides. However, what Justice Scalia is talking about is a very individualized issue, which is he believes that Justice Kennedy, the swing vote, may decide that he is against the death penalty, at which point the Supreme Court would be 5-4 against the death penalty. And what the liberal justices have been talking about is that, in their opinion, according to evolving standards of decency, that the death penalty should no longer be accepted. Now, at a fundamental level, this notion of evolving standards of decency is not something that judges get to decide. Evolving standards of decency in a democracy is left up to the voters. That's supposed to be left up to the legislature. So the Supreme Court is overstepping their bounds here. Now, that being said, if you take a step back and you look at this historically, this is a cycle. The Supreme Court has struck down the death penalty previously. And what we're really looking at here, if you look at this historically, is we're in a cycle here where people are arguing that we should legalize marijuana and other drugs and that we should strike down the death penalty. That sounds suspiciously like the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s.
Yeah,
exactly.
So what will eventually happen here is that you will get some very bad cases, and people will be reminded about why the death penalty exists and why, in some cases, it needs to be used.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, District Attorney Hogan, is that if this is done away with by the Supreme Court, within a few years, American citizens will be reminded of why that we have this in place. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And when I go out and talk to groups who want to talk about the death penalty, I'll give them some facts from real cases and ask them whether they're for or against the death penalty. I'll say, would you apply the death penalty in this case? And I'll say, all right, let's imagine somebody breaks into your house and tortures and kills your wife and children. And it turns out this is the 7th house that this guy has done this to over the last 5 years. And people say, oh, no, that guy's got to die. And we have a 5-year-old. And the 5-year-old's father tortures and kills the 5-year-old. What do you think should happen? And they're like, oh, that guy's got to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He has to be put in the ground.
Fundamental Islamic jihadists who are in the United States and who want to do harm to the United States. And they end up setting off bombs and killing 30 or 40 United States citizens. And people say, oh, no, that's where the death penalty should apply. And they're right. But you need to be much more selective about when you use it. I agree with death penalty opponents that prosecutors have overused the death penalty. When we apply the death penalty in Chester County, we limit it to, one, it's got to be an area where legally the aggravating factors trigger a potential death penalty sentence. But on top of that, our policy is there have to be 3 other factors. One, there has to be overwhelming evidence of guilt, because I don't want to hear anybody arguing 20 years down the line this person might actually have been innocent.
Yeah.
2, it has to be somebody who did something truly horrific. And we had a death penalty case a couple years ago where a guy killed and chopped up a 16-year-old with chainsaws. And
Wow,
then
that's just
chopped
gruesome.
up a couple of dogs to cover up killing the 16-year-old. Then he disposed of the 16-year-old's body in a land site and that family has never even found the body.
Oh my
And he got the
gosh.
death penalty. And then the third factor is it has to be a really bad person, a person who just cannot be salvaged in any way. And that means we very seldom apply it when we're looking at a 17, 18, 19-year-old killer. We're applying it to people who are usually experienced criminals.
Wow. Yeah, just
There's just some sick people out there that I 100% agree with you that there's just no way that they can come back from what they've done. They're just their life has been riddled with crime, and that's all they know, and that's all they're going to resort to if they ever come out of prison. So I 100% agree with you. There are certain people out there that you can't save them, and in some cases I think that they need to meet the death penalty. I don't agree with the personal method. I think it's too expensive that we've been using. I think it'd be a lot cheaper if we brought back the firing squad, things along that lines. But yeah, I think Ryan had another question about the appeals process.
Actually, I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier, Ryan, is that, Mr. Hogan, do you think that the process that we have now for administering the death penalty is the process that we should stick with? Like if that's the best method possible?
This is just a silly portion of the debate that's been created by people who are fundamentally philosophically opposed to the death penalty. They are saying that the way we are executing people is inhumane. These are the same people who argued that hanging and that firing squads were inhumane. Quite frankly, every day there are animals, dogs or cats that have to be put down that are put down perfectly humanely, perfectly painlessly. And doctors will tell you that there are plenty of ways to painlessly put down a human being, particularly a criminal. And so there are plenty of easy ways to do this. Unfortunately, we have people overdosing on heroin and prescription drugs every day, sort of imposing their own death penalty. So what has happened is people who are trying to muck up the process of the death penalty are trying to create as many impediments as possible. So there are plenty of drugs out there that could be used effectively and economically to do this job.
Also, with Governor Wolf coming out with this moratorium of the death penalty, what do you feel about that? How do you feel about that?
What he did was unlawful. He knows that it's unlawful because he's now trying to reconstitute it as he did something else. If he would have taken each individual case and said, I am looking at the merits of these cases, and I am deciding in this particular case to grant debt, then he'd be allowed to do it. But you cannot simply say, I am granting a moratorium against the death penalty for everybody. He is overstepping constitutional bounds. And unfortunately, I'm seeing this more and more by various governmental entities and people in government where they're saying, you know what, I'm going to decide what law is right, what law is wrong, and which law we should enforce. And what if all of a sudden I decided in Chester County, you know what, I'm the Chester County DA. I'm no longer going to enforce the law of rape.
Yeah.
And I can do that, but that's crazy. I can't do that. The legislature says rape is against the law. And by the way, I would never do that. But that is the equivalent of what some of these folks are doing. So you're seeing both our governor and our current attorney general who are deciding what laws they like, what laws they don't. And those are the laws they're going to enforce.
Yeah, just another mess there you're bringing up, Attorney General Kathleen Kane, something we've talked about.
Yeah, we've talked about extensively on this show.
All of her troubles that she's currently going through. And I don't know, in Chester County, have you seen was there a point where there was a gradual decrease of application of the death penalty, or has it always been a very kind of strict, methodical process of when to use it?
No, it has gone up and down according to who the district attorney is. When I came into office, I thought that too many cases had the death penalty applied to them. So I de-deathed a whole series of cases. And as a matter of fact, the Philadelphia district attorney, Seth Williams, did the same thing. When he came into office, he looked at a whole series of cases and said, yes, Some of these are appropriate for the death penalty. Some of them clearly are not.
Yeah, and we saw, especially here in Philadelphia, back in the day with Lynn Abraham when she was district attorney, the just rapid rate that she pursued the death penalty here, just for all sorts of cases where she could find one aggravating circumstance to check off. But it's something interesting to discuss because this has been in the news a lot,
Yes,
and there are lots of people that are out there that are saying now Pope Francis coming out and saying that the U.S. should get rid of the death penalty. But there are these crimes out there that people say, oh, it's okay for this, but then not for this.
Yes.
Well, and if you want a really good example of how even liberals will apply the death penalty in the right circumstance, you just look at the Boston Marathon bombing trial. That was in the state of Massachusetts, which is one of the most goofily liberal states in the United States. But when they were presented, that jury of Massachusetts citizens, with the facts of that case and what the remaining Sarnev brother did, the people of Massachusetts, decided that the death penalty was appropriate.
Yeah,
he did.
And if the people of Massachusetts believe that under the right circumstances that the death penalty is still appropriate, I'm pretty sure most of the United States, under the right circumstances, would agree to the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example to look at here. So, Mr. Hogan, I really appreciate you joining us here on Rational Radio for this conversation. It was great to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys keep up the good work, and let's hope the Owls have a good weekend.
That's right. Yes, we are hoping for that. Hopefully they can beat Eastern Carolina tomorrow night.
Definitely. Thursday night game.
Yeah, so we hope you'll come back soon to talk about some other issues on here.
Absolutely. You guys keep up the good work.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.